His bed is a box, old folks and children wander by.
Hello, this is Hilary Seabrook. Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World.
His bed is a box.
What you're listening to is an extract from His Bed is a Box, which is a haiku, and it's from composer, lyricist and guitarist Freddie Bryant's new album, Upper West Side Love Story. This is a lovely album, and I'm really looking forward to talking to Freddie about it. So the album was apparently written in 2019, then continued during the COVID quarantine, and then finishing being recorded last year, and now finally out now. It's a chamber jazz ensemble about homelessness and the uprooting of families due to gentrification. So thank you for joining me once more for Harmonious World, and I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Freddie Bryant.
Wander by our neighbor again.
Thank you for having me. This is great. Wonderful.
Tell me about West Side Love Story.
Well, it started out as a grant from Chamber Music America, which was a grant that I've been trying to get for, it seems like, decades. And I was very happy to get it. And the only thing that they required besides submitting some of your music was the ensemble, the members of the ensemble. And so I thought about it, and really that started first. I said, I want to do something with vocals. Carla Cook is amazing. And then because Carla is from Detroit, and I realized I also wanted to have something a little bit that could cross over to some classical textures. So I wanted the strings. And I had played with Regina Carter, and she's also from Detroit, and went to high school with Carla. And same thing with Gwen Laster, who's the violist. She went to the same high school, same time. And they have all played with Akua Dixon on cello. So I knew that they would be kind of a cohesive trio. I decided not to go for a quartet. I don't know. I did some research, and I thought it would be concise. And then for the horns, Donnie McCaslin and Steve Wilson have been playing with me since the beginning. Not the beginning, but late 80s I met Donnie, and early 90s I met Steve, and they've both been on CDs of mine in the past. The rhythm section is really cooking with Al Vester Garnett on the drums, and John Benitez, who has both of them have so many facets of their musicality and rhythm, with Latin and everything, it's and swinging, grooving, and really connecting with the music, adding their own vibe to it. So that was really the key, that ensemble. Then I got the grant at the end of a 3-year battle with investment landlords that were trying to evict us from the home that I lived in off and on since 1967. And, it's a rent-controlled apartment in New York City, very valuable real estate. So their modus operandi is to buy up the last controlled and rent stabilized apartments and convert them and sell them. Basically, the only obstacle are the people that are already living there. So that's what happened. After 3 years, we gave up. It was just too much, too costly, and in the end, I'm very happy because it really wouldn't have paid off even if we had one Just not going into details about the New York laws, but we would have ended up owing lots of money if we had lost. And if we had won, we still would owe lots of money to the lawyers. And how many years does that pay off with the cheap rent? So that was very, a difficult, stressful time for me, having to separate from where I grew up and where my mother, my father, my grandmother, they all passed away inside the apartment. It's like very hallowed and deep kind of territory, and memories. So I decided to write about that. And after that, and I will say this, and some people will laugh, but it's true. Luckily, COVID happened because I had time to write this large piece. If it had premiered in October 2010 when it was supposed to, it would probably be 3 pieces. And maybe I would have continued to write after that to finish the full piece. But because COVID delayed everything, I really had time to just concentrate on this piece. First of all, it was the first time that I had written lyrics. And I had written lots of poetry in my life, but lyrics and set to music, that was another story. So that took me 3 months to write that. And then after that, it took me a year to write the music.
Right. Actually, so I'm going to play some clips alongside this. And I'm actually planning to start with His Bed is a Box, which is a haiku.
Okay.
And you wrote that as a haiku. That's like, I'm going to write a poem, but actually I'm going to make it difficult for myself because it has to be 575.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I thought it was going to be difficult for me, but for me, it was actually a simpler thing, a structure that made me just focus on certain aspects, like a pastiche, just a little painting of one part of the neighborhood or one story, as opposed to the long poems that I was writing that were kind of cumbersome to try to figure out how to make it into a uniform piece, So with the haiku, I know it was 575, but once I figured that out, it was done. And then the question was, how do I make it into music? In the opening piece, Columbus Quiet, it comes in the middle after a long setup of the band, and then the band ends and the theme comes back again. With His Bed is a Box, it made sense to make it a blues. And the reason is for a couple of reasons. One is the blues' form most often is a 3-phrase form. A, and then repeat A in some kind of way, and then B, So I did that with His Bed is a Box, Old Folks' Children Wander By. His bed is a box, old folks' children wander by. And then at the end, our neighbor again. And it just says something about the neighborhood because those people, were familiar. They were our neighbors. And then I allowed that to continue into the musical form by repeating that. Wandered by our neighbor again. And so I did extend. I had many more syllables than 575. And also there's a little bit of cheating if you notice in the beginning she says, our bed is a box, old folks and children wander by. That's 8. But I said, no worries, that's fine. And later on, it's old folks' children wander by. And so I wrote 8 haiku,
Right.
and it allowed me to sort of put the pen down and sort of after I got that and go back to the longer works or continue, and then I organized it in
Yeah.
terms of yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thanks
And
for playing that.
no, and it tells a great story about this neighborhood that you obviously grew up in and your family lived in for so long. And um I think one of the reasons I like this album particularly is because one of my favorite films is West Side Story, and the original, and
Correct.
that's really evocative um of that area, that part of New York. So perhaps
Yeah, it was really.
romanticized, but
It's romanticized, but in the more recent reissue or redoing of the movie of West Side Story, they tried to be a little bit more historical and talk about how Lincoln Center removed a neighborhood, the lower part of Upper West Side, which was called San Juan Hill. And so in my Upper West Side Love Story.com, I have a website that talks about this piece. It has all the lyrics and even has notes on the lyrics. And in the notes, there are sometimes links to articles about certain aspects like this neighborhood. So, because West Side Story was about Puerto Rican people and Irish people and and kind of friction that was made up because there were no Irish and gangs in that neighborhood. But I heard previously they were talking about having it be Jewish and Italian, and then they ended up with Puerto Rican and Irish. And what happened was that they actually did take down a much part of this neighborhood called um, uh, San Juan Hill that removed 7,000 families and 800 businesses. So one of the poems I say, music, dance, and drama, or something like that, lived on the bones of San Juan Hill. That's one of the poems but San Juan Hill seems like it's about Puerto Rican people because it says San Juan. But one of the reasons why it might have been named San Juan Hill is because there was an African American regiment that fought in San Juan during the Spanish American War. And they lived in that neighborhood. So there's a lot of African Americans there too.
wow.
So yeah, I mean it's the Upper West Side is a bunch of neighborhoods. It's not one thing,
Right.
and so you go from one to another, and on one block it was rich, old money, and on other places it would be tenements, and so those were the buildings that they started to move out first.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah.
eventually our apartment sold for $2.3 million.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. It's
Anyway,
just, yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
So at this point in the podcast, I would like to play a bit of one of my other favorite tracks, which is Kids Rhymes. I love that. So
Yes.
tell me about that one.
Well, I'm wearing this T-shirt right now. I actually commissioned this artwork of the playground that was at the corner of my block between 1968 and 1972. And it was a playground that was not made by the city of New York. It was made by volunteers, an organization that was not governmental. And they collected found objects and real objects, like a real fire engine from the 1950s or 60s, a real 8-person lifeboat, a real propeller, which was so big. It was propeller from a tugboat. It was so big that 8 kids could jump on it at the same time.
Wow.
And there was also a spool, a huge spool that usually winds these huge metal cables. It was just sitting there too for people to climb on and get splinters from. And then there was of course, a handball court. So handball was very popular in New York at the time. And one of the games was called Booties Up. So one of the, during one of the rhymes, there we're talking about the names of the games like Double Dutch, Stickball, and Booties Up. Booties Up, and from my memory, was if you lost at handball, the winners could you had to stand against the wall with your hands against the wall, and the winners could throw the ball at your booty as hard as they could. And depending on their aim, they might hit you in a more inconvenient place, or who knows. It was not my most fun game, because normally it was the little kids who would be losing, and I was a little kid, so I was around 6 to 10 at the time. And we would go down to the end of the block, and our parents would just, let's say, come back at lunch, and they might look to an older kid and say, Maria, who's 9 years old, make sure Freddie, who's 6 years old, comes back at noon,
Yeah.
And then we would that was our world. So that was the story of kids' rhymes. It was our world. The parents were in some other dimension, down the block. They might be yelling, "Come back, it's lunchtime," or "Don't go around the block."
Running the block from Amsterdam up to the park, all by ourselves, no mom, no pop. From the window they'd yell, "Stop, you've gone too far, it's time to eat, don't go round the block, get your behind off the street." Remember that back in the day, remember that, did it our way. Kids on the street made a crew and had a world only we knew. Stickball and double dutch, handball and booties up. Cops and robbers ring and run. I'm the Indian brave, don't play with guns. Cadillac wheels in 72 down Suicide Hill, oh please ride through. 8-cent stamp, dime for a bar, 30-cent slices right in a car. Hey, what's a token? This turnstile is broken.
most of the rhymes I made up, but
Right.
then high waters can't be beat, 50 feet above the street. That was about, at the time. Now it's in fashion, but at the time, if you could see your socks or your ankles and your long pants were that long, we call them high waters, and we would make fun of people who had them.
Right.
Another thing that the kids did, kids are sometimes a little bit, oh my goodness. Well, you know how they have their own world. So when some kid would come with brand new white Keds or whatever, there's something called stepsies. So the older kids would, basically scuff them up. You have to
Okay.
run away from them. It's because they wanted to scuff your white Keds up. And so these are all memories, and of course, playing in in the hydrants. The hydrants would be opened on hot days, and people would take Coke cans and cut off the side and direct the flow of the
Oh.
water. So
Oh.
that's what that rhyme is about, Coke cans. And if a car went down the block, if they back in those days when many cars didn't have air conditioning, they have their windows open. So I said, close your window or you're going to get a drive-by shower as opposed to drive, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
so yeah, that was key. That's been made famous in many iconic images of the Upper West Side of New York, and also in Spike Lee's "Do the Right Thing." I think it was that movie,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, I'm
Wow.
glad you like that.
Yeah, I really do.
The melody of the main section is based on a pentatonic scale that's really popular in West Africa and especially Mali. And, the whole griot aspect of storytelling is really important in African music. And for me, I was drawing on that inspiration. And the same five notes in that scale evolve are modulated. So it starts on G and it sounds kind of minor or suspended, kind of a interesting sound for most of the piece. But then it resolves to F for da 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 da, a regular
Ah,
major pentatonic.
right.
And that's when we start clapping and we go into the rhymes without those rhymes where it really gets into it, and I trade off with Carla doing some of the rhymes, and that to me was a modulation into American style, that kind of ham bone kind of where people used to play body percussion and clap. It's not ham bone per se. It's my take on it. It was, again, just like the West African pentatonic is not West African music. It's just inspired by it. This was
Right.
inspired by ham bone, and it was very American, very like what we might have done in the playground at the time, and making up our own rhymes. And then it goes back to the African
Wow.
texture and vibe. Yeah.
So what are you doing now? You've written this, you've recorded it. Are you performing it live?
No,
It's
no.
too
Unfortunately,
complex.
we did it in the opposite order, which was actually cool. Because it worked out that we knew the piece better.
Right.
When you go into the studio, you record it and then you tour it. I mean, maybe people who have the budget do both. They play it and then they record it and then they play it some more. But with the nine amazing and totally in demand musicians,
Yeah.
it was incredibly hard to find dates that we could all do. In fact, between September 12th and December 19th, there was only December 19th when everybody was available to record. And I really wanted to finish it by January. So actually September 12th, we actually recorded everybody together. And then in October, because there was no other dates that, people were available, all 9 of us, we recorded the strings. No, they recorded the horns and the vocals and the rhythm section, and then had the strings come later and did some vocal overdubs. So luckily for technology, it actually worked out better that we could be efficient, because really, if you boil it down, we had 2 days, 2 full days to do 92 minutes of music, and very complicated music. So we did have overdub days, but not with everybody. Right. So to get the basic tracks, we had those 2 days, and that's really difficult.
One of the things that occurred to me about this album is you talked earlier about musicians who've got experience in other genres and that sort of thing, is that this doesn't really have a genre, does it? It kind of goes across everything.
Well, I mean, I like, my career has been, if you use a word that is a little bit less positive, diffused, but also infused by so many cultures. So in the music business, people usually don't like diffuse, they like focused labels. This is Latin jazz, this is swing, this is traditional jazz, this is fusion, this is avant-garde, whatever that means, And I think in my perspective, it's the strength of the piece that so many people, it will be acceptable and pleasant and what's the word? So people from many walks of life and experiences will like parts of it,
Yeah.
But it is very acoustic. So I mean, acoustic jazz is probably where it should go, because jazz is such a diverse name. What is jazz? And there's so many different types of it. And I guess that's true, but I leave that up to, you and anybody who's listening to try to decide that.
Right.
Of course, I guess Spotify and all those places want to put it somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the nice things about this podcast is that I can just interview people whose music I like, and I don't need to put it into a category. I can just say I like it. So it's cool. Yeah,
that's wonderful. I love looking and listening to your podcast, and I mean, it would take a few years I should have started from the beginning and never missed a week. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because
you should have done.
Now it's like all the books. It's all the books on my shelf. It's kind of hard to catch up the ones that I didn't read.
No, absolutely.
At this point.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can dip
But
it
it's really
out.
admirable what you did. It's really admirable what you did, and especially just bringing such an eclectic and wonderful, diverse, body of musicians together. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, thank you. That for me that's everything. That's just, and it doesn't matter to me what race or age or gender or anything you are. Just let me listen to your music, so it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks, Freddie.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me for Harmonious World, and I hope you enjoyed listening to my conversation with Freddie Bryant. What you're listening to is another track from Upper West Side Love Story. And this is last song, It's Time to Say Goodbye, which is just so poignant. And there are elements of Coltrane's Naima on this ballad, which are just stunning. So thank you for joining me once more for Harmonious World, and I hope you have a great week. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.